talking about the exchange rate policy implemented by a country's central bank, there could be two major regimes. One is a fixed and another is a flexible. So fixed regime basically makes your own currency pegged to another major currency at a fixed rate. So no matter what economic condition, the exchange rate is always a single fixed number. And a flexible exchange regime will allow the economic factors such as interest rate, inflation, income level to affect the exchange rates freely. There is pros and cons for each exchange rate regime. For example, if like United States are adopting the flexible exchange rate regime, so it's completely determined by the free market. So it's very easy for the external economic factors like a UK inflation or Japanese interest rate to affect the exchange rate. And also, the Federal Reserve does not have to intervene the exchange rate market. They do not have to increase or decrease the dollar supply in the country to reach certain goal of exchange rate because there's no such a goal of a fixed exchange rate under the flexible exchange rate regime. So that could obtain the national policy autonomy for the central bank of the country. And there's also arguments against a flexible exchange regime, or you can see that as an argument in favor of a fixed exchange regime. So the arguments are under the flexible exchange regime, the exchange rate is uncertain, and this could affect international trade. True that a volatile exchange regime would indicate a lot of risk in converting currencies back and forth, and the international companies, when they're doing export, import, or doing investments overseas, they have to consider that risk, and they have to spend energies and time and financial resources to hedge that risk through buying financial products in the international market or just do operating techniques. And we will talk about those techniques later. And the flexible exchange rate regime does not quite prevent the crisis to happen. So if there is a downfall of a country's economy, then the exchange rate of that currency would drop down under the flexible exchange regime. If it is a fixed exchange regime, then the government will intervene, will boost up the value of the currency, and will save the economy. So these are certain advantages of a fixed rate regime or disadvantage of a flexible exchange regime. So under these two regimes, there are different arrangements ranking from a higher degree of freedom to lower degree of freedom. And of course, stay on the top is the free-floating arrangements adopted by mostly the free countries like United States, Australia, Canada, Japan, South Africa, and so on. And so there is no central bank intervention at all under the free-floating exchange rate regime. So it's purely driven by the market. The second degree is managed floating regime arrangement, and there are some countries adopting that. There could be some government intervention if the exchange rate goes too wild and too risky, and also has certain possibility of a financial crisis. And under that circumstance, the government would jump in and control a little bit. And then there is the third arrangement is called a stabilized arrangement, and this is not as much free as the previous one. So basically, under this arrangement, the spot exchange rate will remain within a margin of a 2%. It can either go up or go down by 2% in a 6-month or more time period. So this would be treated as a fixed rate regime with only small amount of fluctuation. We also have a crawling peg here. In order to understand crawling peg, you need to understand the traditional conventional peg policy under here. It is the most unfree arrangement. The local currency is pegged to US dollar at a certain exchange rate, at a very fixed exchange rate. And no matter what happens, it's the same number for that exchange rate. So that's what this traditional peg is. And a crawling peg is a little bit better than that, than conventional peg. in terms of a little adjustment by the market forces, but it still is pretty fixed. There are also nations with no national currency at all, like countries of Panama. They use U.S. dollars. Their economy is called dollarized. And there are some small European countries. They use euros. They do not issue their own currency. This is different than Germany or France, who use euros as well, because those countries are within the eurozone. But these countries like Montenegro and San Marino are not in the eurozone. Well, is it always so that U.S. has this free floating exchange rate policy? Not true. All right. So if we get back to the long scope of the history, so what happens before 1973? So we have five different evolutionary periods for the international monetary system. Before 1875, we have this bimetallism. You know, bi means two, and so two metals here are silver and gold, and they have the fixed exchange rate of 1 ounce of gold equivalent to 15 ounces of silver. So that fixed exchange rate has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. That facilitate international trade. If the Germans want to trade with the British, they have to pay either gold or silver. Likewise, for all the other nations, if they want to trade and if they accept a currency, it has to be either silver or gold, unless you are doing barter trade. I mean, it's a goods for good trade. That's quite old. Okay, and then after 1875, there is a massive exploration of gold mines in the world. Like a lot of gold mines were discovered in South Africa, in United States, of course, like San Francisco area, and also in Australia. So when we discover a lot of gold, so gold becomes oversupplied, and then the exchange rate of gold and silver is not able to be maintained. So what would happen is the silver will be crowded out of the circulation system. So think about this. When gold has more supplies due to all these new gold mines, then which currency becomes more valuable than before? I'm not talking about silver is more valuable per ounce than gold. So which currency is more valuable than before? Of course, gold is still more expensive than silver per ounce of weight, but the value of a silver in the price of a gold becomes more than before, and the value of a gold in terms of silver becomes less than before. So what would happen here is if you are an international trader and you're looking at a currency which is the silver being appreciating and another currency being depreciating, which currency would you like to spend? Okay, of course you want to store the silver because it's appreciating for investment value, and you want to spend the gold which is depreciating for circulation. You want to get rid of it. You want to get it out of your hand. So more and more gold has been injected into the circulation system, and eventually all the silvers are saved by the merchants, and all the golds will become the only currency in the international trade. And then in 1914, the first World War broke out. Then we have a chaotic period from the beginning of World War One to the end of World War Two. You know, gold has become the most valuable currency to buy things, and also the paper currencies were not widely accepted, especially when the major European countries are hostile to each other. And then after the defeat of Germany and Japan in 1945, all the major countries come together. They developed this Bretton Woods system led by the United States. So under the Bretton Woods system, all the currencies like Deutsche Mark, French franc, British pound will be pegged to US dollar at a fixed exchange rate. Okay, so for like over 20 years, the dollar has a fixed exchange rate with all the other major currencies. And then the US dollar has a fixed exchange rate with the gold. It was 1 ounce of gold for 35 US dollars. And what happened in 1972? At that time, U.S. government has a lot of spending for social welfare programs and also for the military spending in Vietnam War. And when the government spent a lot of money, more and more dollars being printed out, and the gold did not quite increase during the same time. So what happens is gold becomes more expensive in terms of dollars, and a dollar become cheaper in terms of gold. So that 1 ounce of gold equivalent to 35 US dollar rate cannot be maintained. If a dollar cannot be exchanged to gold at the fixed rate, then all the other major countries like UK, France, and Germany would not exchange their currencies with US dollars at previous fixed level. So that's called the collapse of a Bretton Woods system when US cannot maintain the fixed rate between gold and dollar. So the other major currencies do not maintain a fixed rate with the US dollar either. And then we enter into a flexible exchange rate regime among the free countries like US, Canada, Australia, France, and UK. And that has been until now. Okay, so here is a diagram showing you the exchange rate regime in the Bretton Woods system period. So all the major currencies are pegged to US dollars at a fixed level, and the US dollar is pegged with gold at a fixed level as well. And here I'm going to talk about the financial crisis starting in the exchange market. Let's start with the Mexican peso crisis starting in 1994. In your on the canvas in this module, I have posted a video link providing a background of this Mexican peso crisis.